During our vacation, my fiancé pulled me aside at dinner and said loud enough for strangers to hear, "Don't embarrass yourself trying to order. You don't even know what this food is." The waiter looked at me with pity. I just nodded. 3 weeks later, she learned how expensive that vacation really was. The moment our engagement ended, I was looking at a menu, written in a language I couldn't read. In a restaurant so quiet, you could hear the silk of the waitress's kimono rustling as she walked. We were in Kyoto, Japan, on the third night of a 2-week vacation that was supposed to be the prelude to our wedding. The dinner was a multi-course kaiseki experience, a kind of culinary art form. It was the kind of thing my fiancée Nancy lived for. The waitress presented the menu. Nancy, without even glancing at me, immediately took charge, speaking to the waitress in the condescendingly slow and loud English people use when they assume no one understands them. When the waitress politely asked for my order, Nancy physically put a hand on my arm, stopping me from speaking. She pulled me a few inches closer and said, just loud enough for the couple at the next table and the waitress to hear clearly, "Babe, don't embarrass yourself trying to order. You don't even know what this food is. I'll handle it." The waitress's professional smile faltered for just a second. She looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated pity. The man at the next table quickly looked down at his plate. Nancy just smiled, basking in what she perceived as her worldly sophistication. She had just publicly cast me as the uncultured fool and herself as the cosmopolitan guide, saving me from my own ignorance. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just gave a small, slow nod. I looked at the waitress and said, "Whatever my fiancé recommends will be fine, thank you." My mind, however, was already thousands of miles away, back in my office. In that single, public act of humiliation, a complex project had just been red flagged for immediate and catastrophic failure. The partnership was dissolved. All that was left was the asset liquidation. Nancy had no idea, but she had just made this the most expensive vacation of her entire life. Let's get one thing straight. I am not a doormat. I am not a simp. I am an import-export consultant. My entire world revolves around logistics, customs law, and the complex, often brutal, world of international trade. I move high-value goods across borders. I understand supply chains, tariff codes, and the precise, unforgiving language of a bill of lading. My job is to see every angle, anticipate every problem, and ensure that every asset reaches its destination with maximum efficiency and minimum liability. I don't deal with emotions. I deal with ledgers. I met Nancy a year ago. She was working as a gallery assistant, surrounded by a world of art and luxury she desperately wanted but couldn't afford. She was beautiful, ambitious, and possessed a social grace I admittedly lacked. I saw her as an underperforming asset with potential. I come from a straightforward, working-class background. While I've become successful, I've never been comfortable in the world of high society she navigated so effortlessly. I made a calculated investment. I proposed a partnership. I would provide the financial backing to elevate her lifestyle, and she would provide the social expertise, acting as my partner in a world I wanted to better understand for professional reasons. It was a probationary arrangement. I wasn't paying her bills indefinitely. I was funding a 1-year joint venture to see if it would yield a worthwhile return. This trip to Japan was the final assessment before the potential merger of our lives. For a year I logged the data, the constant, subtle digs about my simple tastes. The way she and her best friend, a deeply unpleasant woman named Jenna, would exchange smirking glances when I didn't recognize a designer's name. Her growing sense of entitlement to my money. I saw it all not as red flags, but as operational costs. The question was whether the asset's potential would eventually outweigh these costs. Her comment in that restaurant was the final entry in the ledger. It was a public declaration of contempt. It proved she saw me not as a partner, but as a stepping stone. A crude but necessary tool to get what she wanted. The venture was a failure. My job now was to manage the fallout and ensure the liability fell exactly where it belonged, on her. As the exquisite 20-course meal began to arrive, I didn't taste a single bite. I was already drafting a new logistics plan in my head, a plan to import a single high-maintenance liability back to the United States and present her with the bill. Update 1. The 5 days following that dinner were a masterclass in strategic procurement. Nancy interpreted my quiet compliance as submission. She thought she had won, that she had successfully established her dominance in the relationship. She became even more brazen in her spending and more condescending in her attitude. This was exactly what I needed. "I'm going shopping tomorrow in Ginza," she announced the next morning. "You should probably just stay at the hotel. You'd be bored." "That's a good idea," I said. "I have some work to catch up on." The moment she left, I initiated the first phase of my plan: asset acquisition and liability assignment. My work wasn't a lie. I spent the entire day on my laptop and phone, not dealing with my usual clients, but creating a new one, a shell corporation registered in Delaware called Aperture Global Imports. I built a simple but professional-looking website for it. I arranged for a phone number with a virtual receptionist. To any cursory glance, it was a legitimate boutique import-export business. Then I went shopping. I went to the same high-end district she was in. But I went to different stores. I bought a vintage Rolex, a set of handcrafted Japanese knives, a rare single malt whiskey. These weren't gifts, these were product samples for my new company, Aperture Global. I kept every receipt, every certificate of authenticity, and documented them as business expenses. When Nancy returned to the hotel, laden with bags, I presented her with my own purchases. I gave her the Rolex. "An early wedding present," I said. She was ecstatic. The price tag, which I had accidentally left on, made her eyes go wide. The next day, she wanted to visit an art gallery. There, she fell in love with a series of modern woodblock prints. They were beautiful, and they were expensive. "We have to have these for the new house," she declared, already spending money on a future that no longer existed. "Of course," I said. I purchased the prints. But when the gallery prepared the paperwork, I had them list the buyer as Aperture Global Imports. I explained to the gallery owner that I was an importer and these were for a client. I handled all the export paperwork myself, ensuring everything was meticulously and, more importantly, commercially documented. Nancy was too busy taking selfies with the art to notice. This continued for 4 more days. A designer handbag here, a custom-made silk kimono there. Each purchase was a carefully laid trap. She thought I was showering her with gifts, placating her after her display of dominance. I was doing something else entirely. I was loading her up with high-value commercial goods that she believed were her personal property. I kept a running tally. The total value of the gifts I had given her came to just over $92,000. The night before we were scheduled to fly home, I put the final pieces in place. I logged into my airline account. I upgraded my own seat to first class on a different flight that left 12 hours earlier than ours. I cited a sudden, unavoidable business meeting in New York. "You'll have to handle the luggage yourself, I'm afraid," I told her, with a look of deep regret. "But it's just a few bags. You'll be fine. I'll see you at home tomorrow." She was annoyed at having to travel alone, but the mountain of luxury goods she was bringing home was a significant consolation. She had no idea the logistical nightmare that awaited her. My final act before leaving for the airport was to log into my credit card account. Nancy was an authorized user on my primary card, the one with no spending limit. I reported her card as lost and had it immediately deactivated. I then composed an email. It was a detailed tip to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. The email was a work of art. It was from a concerned business associate. It stated that a passenger named Nancy arriving on flight JL06 from Tokyo, was a mule for an art smuggling ring. It claimed she was attempting to import undeclared, high-value commercial goods disguised as personal gifts to evade customs duties. It provided her flight number, her seat number, and a detailed list of the items she would be carrying, complete with their exact monetary values. It suggested that a thorough, Level 3 inspection of all her luggage would be prudent. I sent the email from a secure, untraceable address. Then I went to the airport, boarded my flight, and flew home. I turned my phone off. The trap was set. The shipment was en route, and the recipient was about to be presented with an invoice she could never hope to pay. Update 2. I landed in New York, went to my apartment, and slept for 8 solid hours. The silence from Nancy was expected. She wouldn't realize her predicament until she landed. I spent my day at home, tracking her flight online. It landed at JFK at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time. That's when the show would have started. I have a contact who works in freight forwarding at JFK. He can't give me specific details about customs inspections, but he can give me general information about processing times for certain flights. A few hours after her flight landed, I sent him a casual text asking if there were any unusual delays with the baggage from JL006. His reply came an hour later. Yeah, big one. CBP pulled a bunch of passengers for secondary. Heard they nailed some lady trying to bring in a ton of undeclared luxury stuff. Rumor is she's still in there. Total mess. I smiled. The system worked. The first frantic voicemail from Nancy came through at 6:30 p.m., a full 6 hours after her flight had landed. Her voice was a cracked, terrified whisper. Where are you? I'm in some room at the airport. They took everything. They're saying I have to pay taxes, thousands of dollars. My card was declined. Call me. Please, call me. The second voicemail came an hour later. She was sobbing uncontrollably. They think I'm a smuggler. They're talking about fines and penalties. Jenna is on her way to try and help. Why isn't my card working? I have no money. They won't let me leave with my things. I listened to the messages, then deleted them. This was her campaign of humiliation. This was my counter-offensive. I pieced together the rest of the story later from a mutual acquaintance who got the full, hysterical version from Jenna. When Nancy arrived at customs, she was flagged immediately, just as I had planned. She was escorted to a secondary inspection room. They unpacked every single one of her bags. They found the Rolex, the art, the kimono, the handbag. Everything. The customs officer had a printout. It was a list of her gifts. Next to each item was its declared commercial value, based on the export documents I had so meticulously filed in Japan. The $92,000 worth of art and luxury goods. The officer explained that these were not personal effects. They were commercial imports, and as the importer of record, she was liable for the customs duties, tariffs, and taxes. He then presented her with the preliminary bill, $31,274, payable immediately. Nancy, of course, laughed. She told them it was a mistake. These were gifts from her rich fiancé. She pulled out the credit card I had so thoughtfully provided. It was declined. She tried again. Declined. The panic began to set in. She tried to call me. My phone was off. Jenna arrived a few hours later, a useless cavalry charge. She apparently tried to argue with the customs officers, which went about as well as you'd expect. They were not impressed. Nancy was presented with a choice. She could pay the $31,000 and take her goods, or she could sign a form surrendering the goods to the U.S. government. If she chose the latter, she would also be placed on a watch list and would face a lifetime of enhanced security screenings every time she traveled internationally. And she might still be liable for civil penalties for making a false declaration. She had no money. She had no choice. She signed the form. She walked out of JFK Airport with nothing but her personal clothing and a handbag full of receipts for things she no longer owned. Everything I had given her was gone. The Rolex, the art, the designer clothes she had bought for herself. All of it was now the property of the U.S. Treasury, destined for a government auction. She had arrived in Japan feeling like a queen. She left America feeling like a criminal. The cost of her public humiliation of me was $31,000 in taxes she couldn't pay and $92,000 in assets she would never see again. The vacation had, indeed, become very expensive. Final update. It has been 3 weeks since the disaster at JFK. The first week was a barrage of increasingly unhinged voicemails and texts from Nancy and Jenna from burner numbers. I ignored them all. I was busy restructuring my life, purging every trace of my failed joint venture. The second week, her parents got involved. Her father, a man who had always treated me with a kind of weary tolerance, left me a stern voicemail demanding I fix the mess I had created. He seemed to believe I had a magic button that could make federal tax liabilities disappear. I responded with a single formal email to him. I attached a detailed, itemized PDF. It was a ledger. On one side, it listed every single dollar I had spent on Nancy's lifestyle over the past year. Her rent, her car payment, both of which I had been covering, the dinners, the trips, the shopping. On the other side, it listed her contributions to our partnership. 0. At the bottom of the ledger, I included a final entry. Estimated cost of public humiliation and breach of partnership contract, $123,274. Value of goods surrendered at JFK, plus preliminary duties. My email was brief. Attached is the final ledger for the now dissolved joint venture between myself and your daughter. As you can see, the partnership was significantly over-leveraged on my side. The incident at customs was an unfortunate but direct consequence of Nancy's decision to publicly redefine our relationship. She chose to treat me as a simple financial instrument. I, in turn, chose to liquidate my investment. The resulting liabilities are hers to manage. I consider this matter closed. He didn't call back. The final confrontation came yesterday. Nancy showed up at my apartment building. She looked diminished. The polished, confident woman I had met a year ago was gone. In her place was someone who looked tired and beaten. I met her in the lobby. I didn't let her up. She started crying immediately. She was sorry. She had been a fool. She had been insecure and had tried to impress her friends. The usual script. "I have nothing," she said, her voice choked with tears. "My parents are making me move back home. I had to get a normal job. Jenna won't even talk to me. She blames me for everything." "I see," I said, my voice betraying no emotion. "Can't you just help?" she pleaded. "Just a little, to get me back on my feet, after everything we had?" I looked at her for a long moment. "What we had, Nancy," I said, my voice as cold and hard as a shipping container, "was a business arrangement. You provided a certain social value, and I provided a certain financial value. But you publicly declared that my value was only financial, and that it was contemptible. You tried to position me as a fool in front of strangers. You fundamentally misunderstood the nature of our agreement." I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture. It was a screenshot from a government auction website. The modern woodblock prints from the gallery in Kyoto were up for sale. "I bought your art back, by the way," I said casually. "Aperture Global got it for 10 cents on the dollar. It was a very good deal." This is what I do, Nancy. I find undervalued assets that have been mismanaged. You mismanaged our partnership. You mismanaged your own brand, and now you've been liquidated. I put my phone away. "The most expensive thing in the world isn't a Rolex or a designer handbag," I said. "It's a bad deal, and you were a very, very bad deal. Goodbye, Nancy." I turned and walked back to the elevator, leaving her standing alone in the lobby. Her vacation was over. Her lifestyle was over. The ledger was finally perfectly balanced.